Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa Clark. I'm an associate physician here at Protea, and today I wanted to chat about insulin and, well, probably something you've heard of called insulin resistance. It's been a word that's been going around out there. You're probably reading lots about it, wondering if you have it, what it means if you do, and how that may or may not be affecting you. It's something that we test and look for commonly here at Protea, both while working with patients who are on some sort of weight loss journey, and also just helping patients optimize their health, because there's a difference between falling within that range of normal and also being optimal. We're here to help you feel your best as soon as possible for as long as possible, and looking at your insulin is one of those key pieces. So, what is insulin? Insulin is a hormone that's made and produced by our endocrine organ called the pancreas. It's released in response to rises in blood sugar. So if you can imagine, you're sitting having a wonderful, maybe not so wonderful breakfast. Let's say it's a typical bagel with cream cheese. Please don't be doing that. But if you are, we accept you either way. We're eating that's causing a rise in our blood sugars. We're breaking down those carbohydrates. In response to that, our pancreas is going to release out insulin. The goal of that is that we don't want sugar circulating within our bloodstream. It at times can be toxic to our cells and cause inflammation. So what we're trying to do is move that sugar from being in our bloodstream and actually move it into a cell. Sugar is something that we use for energy production. So it's not that sugar itself is innately poor or that we don't need it, because we need it to live and for our cells to grow, divide, etc. But again, it's where it is and in the right amounts. So to help with that process, insulin comes in, it's going to talk to our cells, and it's going to tell it to kind of open up a channel, if you will, so that the sugar can flow into the cell. It's a nice, normal, healthy process. So then we have that rise in blood sugar. Insulin comes in, also rises. That causes that sugar to move into the cell. And then that blood sugar then goes down, as does insulin. That's how it should happen. However, insert something called insulin resistance, where that process gets thrown off a little bit. What can happen is over time, if we're eating maybe more carbohydrates than we should, higher sugar foods, we're dabbling into a little bit more soda than we used to, and we're experiencing longer periods of time of higher blood sugar levels, our cells suddenly can get used to insulin being around, because again, that's just part of the response. When that happens, although our blood sugar is higher and although our pancreas has sent out insulin, our cells have now gotten used to insulin just being around them and kind of ignore it. It's almost like giving it the shut eye, or just putting a palm up saying, I know you're here, I'm not really going to listen to you, I'm not interested in it today. And then that equates to a scenario where we have higher blood sugar, our cells aren't getting it inside of them, and higher insulin. That then creates a recipe for what's called insulin resistant. As you can imagine, the cells are now resistant to that insulin signaling and that insulin response. That then can create a whole host of issues, especially causing difficulty losing weight. Insulin itself is an anabolic hormone. I think of her as our hibernating hormone. She's prepping us for winter, even though we don't want her to. She's storing things, holding on to things. She's not letting us burn off any extra fuel that we've otherwise previously stored. So in order for us to be successful on something like a weight loss journey, we need to correct that insulin response. There's a whole host of ways we can do that, and that's where we work with you as an individual to see what's right for you in your case, whether that's a medication, adjustments in your lifestyle or your diet, exercise, or a supplement that can oftentimes help achieve a similar response to that medication. Things that we're looking for in your blood work that we always run for our patients and keep an eye on is your blood sugar, ideally in a fasted state. So we ask patients oftentimes to have their blood drawn when they've been fasting for at least 10 to 12 hours in the morning. So we have an idea of what does your blood sugar look like when you don't have any food on board. We're looking for that to be under 100, but more optimally closer to 80, if not a little bit below 80 is where we see a more optimal fasting blood sugar. In addition to that, we're also going to be taking a look at what's called your hemoglobin A1C. This is giving us an indication of what your blood sugars looked like roughly for the last 3 months. That is the test that we use to diagnose prediabetes and diabetes. The reason for that is this test is actually taking a look at how many red blood cells have an extra sugar molecule stuck to them. That's the percent that we're looking for. If you can imagine, if over the past 3 months you've been having, again, more sugar, more carbs, perhaps less exercise, life happens, that can then cause us to have more of those cells with more sugar stuck to it, and therefore a higher percentage on that test, perhaps putting us in the upper end range of normal or within the pre-diabetic range, which starts at 5.7%, or the diabetic range, which starts at 6.5%. Again, we're working with you to get within optimal, not just within normal, but something that we're taking a look at. The reason it's a 3-month average is because our red blood cells have roughly a 3-month life cycle. So after a 3-month period of time, we get a nice normal fluctuation in those red blood cells. We get rid of some old ones. We make some new ones. We kind of have a new baseline of where we're starting. So it gives us a good idea of how did those adjustments these past 3 months help you get towards that range of optimal. And lastly, one of the other key pieces, as you can imagine, that we take a look at is insulin, and particularly in that fasted state. So when you're fasting and you haven't had any food on board for those 10 to 12 hours, we're ideally looking for very little insulin in your bloodstream because there isn't any sugar around. You haven't eaten anything. So we're looking for you to be within the lower end of the normal range. Oftentimes being under 5 of a fasting insulin is more optimal. And again, the reason for that is because we don't have any need for her to be around. We love her. We just don't need her at that time when we're not eating anything. Because again, if she's too high, it could be a sign of insulin resistance. So those 3 parameters taken together can give us a good idea of how has your blood sugar been managed, not just over the last 3 months, but currently. Is your blood sugar within range, but your insulin is really high? That could tell us, hey, your blood sugar is within range, but you're really struggling. We're putting a lot of stress on your pancreas, and there likely is an evidence and some signs of insulin resistance that we need to work on before we get into trouble down the road of being within a pre-diabetic or a diabetic range. The more proactive we can be, the less work we have to do later on. So if you're interested in having a deeper look at your blood sugar levels or curious if there's something that you're struggling with, we would love to see you. We take nice in-depth look into your overall metabolic health, but really knowing and narrowing in on your insulin piece, your insulin sensitivity can help us know how healthy are you metabolically? Are we set up for success? Are we set up for longevity? And together we can create a plan that not just works for you today, but works for you down the road. Because again, we want you to be as healthy as possible, as soon as possible, but also for as long as we can allow it. So we look forward to hopefully seeing you soon at Protea.